Welcome to the Research Works podcast, brought to you in association with the Healthy Strides Foundation. Your hosts are Dr. Dana Poole
and Dr. Ashley Thornton, and we're here at the AusACPDM conference in Cairns, Australia, to interview world-leading researchers, clinicians, and people with lived experience
to support your practice in being more evidence-based.
We are back at the Research Works podcast booth at AusACPDM. Hi, Dana.
Hello.
And hello, Jacinta Quartermaine, who is a postdoctoral researcher and speech pathologist at CPL.
That's a cool title, Jacinta.
Yeah, it sounds quite nice.
Yeah,
All very recent, but
yes, I know. Well, the last time we spoke to you was kind of just about to happen, like you've done everything.
Yeah.
We couldn't quite call you doctor yet, but we did anyway.
We were on the cusp. Yeah.
You took some liberties with that, didn't you?
Now we're on the other side of it, so it's definitely postdoctoral, right?
Yes, conferred about 2 weeks ago.
Oh, congratulations.
So good. Thank you. Now you just joined the next part of it. I'm now postdoc.
Yeah.
Let's get going.
A little bit. Just keep going.
Yeah. So good.
Yes, but you are at the conference to present in the very prestigious top 7 PhD paper slot, which that's very impressive, and I think speaks to the the quality of the work that you've done as part of your PhD.
Congratulations.
Thank you. Yeah,
so
it's
cool.
amazing to be a part of that.
Isn't it? Yeah. Well, I mean, we're going to talk broadly about your PhD, I think, because, you're only on the show just a few weeks ago.
Yeah.
We're really focused on home participation. But let's put everything into context. But I guess in a nutshell, your PhD is participation experiences of young people with cerebral palsy.
Yes.
I love that. That is just like snappy.
Yeah.
Like really
To the point.
It is,
It's a short one, yes.
Yeah, but we know exactly what you're talking about. Yeah. Well, let's get into it, hey?
Yeah. So, Jacinta, could you, obviously, as Dana said, you spoke in great detail about one of the components of your PhD on the podcast earlier. Could you explain to everyone, I suppose, the broader context and the bigger body of work that has made up your PhD?
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, so last time I was here, we were talking a lot about home participation. Yeah. So that's actually the third study. That's the thesis in the thesis order, I guess. The thesis in general, so research into the participation of young people has traditionally focused more on the school age years. We've definitely moved into the adult years recently. And that was around the time that I had started the PhD. So that's kind of how this fit in. We wanted to capture experiences in that transition period, which kind of felt almost like a bit of a forgotten age group. We were focusing more on the older adults or the school age kids, and then there's this really critical transition period that they go through. So that's kind of how this whole thing came about. And then as my background, I'm a speech pathologist, going through a lot of the papers that were available and speaking to families, there's that voice of the people that also have communication support needs that weren't being captured as much, or if they were being captured, it was being by their caregivers or other people speaking for them. So that became a real focus of what I wanted to capture in my thesis, participation of that transition period and communication support needs. So that's kind of how that came about.
All tied together,
Right. And the fact that, we did cover it last time, but I will say it again. The coolest thing about this is when you first read what your PhD thesis title is, you kind of like go, oh, she's an OT. Right? Yeah. But the fact that you're a speechy with that skill set and lens, when you come at it, and we're talking so much about, human rights here and communication being a human right. And therefore, if we're designing things and trying to support our young people, we know there's a different perspective from parents, caregivers, and I mean, I have a very different perspective to my parents. For them to speak on my behalf, it's kind of not quite good enough.
No.
Right?
There was some research already existing that in more of a quantitative way compared self and proxy reporting of this kind of age group on different things, not quite participation. And there was a difference, a big difference. And when you think about yourself as a young adult or even an older adolescent, your parents don't really, they can take guesses, but they don't really know what your interests are or deep down as well, like what your core feelings are. So you really need to capture the self-report. But it is tricky when we're working with people that have complex communication needs. And I think that's, probably where the
Such a
speech
strength.
pathology
Such a
background
strength.
Definitely.
really helped, because they definitely have capacity to be involved. We just have to set it up in a way that's accessible for them,
Yeah.
and give them the options and the time and the supports to self-report and share their experiences.
Brilliant.
And I know that, you talked about this again in your earlier episodes, so I encourage everyone to listen to that. But just very briefly, what are some of the strategies that you used to ensure that those young adults' voices were heard?
Were captured. So this probably is focusing in more on the kind of second half of my PhD. So there's 2 papers there. The first one is the one we spoke about last time in the home, and the second one is out in the community, and it's hopefully coming out soon. And the way that we captured that, we did quite a novel approach to data collection for this population. We knew we wanted it to be qualitative and broad and just, get them to share their experiences and learn about their experiences. But we wanted them to be able to have the space and the time to receive a question, sit on that question, reply to that question using whatever communication method is appropriate for them. And we ended up settling on this concept of diaries and reflections, and we followed them for about 1 month, and we gave them the option to provide those via written or typed reflections that if or they could video themselves, and that was a way that if they were out in their community and something happened, they could pull out their phone and just share about it or audio record it. But that also allowed people that use AAC to communicate, to film themselves using their high-tech devices or AAC devices. And it really worked. And they were also able to take photos of their experiences as well to go with that. And people used kind of a range of all of them. We weren't sure how it was going to go because it is quite novel, and we just kind of took it as it went. And but it went really, really well. And I think I mentioned this last time, but it almost felt like it gave participants a bit more autonomy over their data, and they were really, really engaged with the project. And I had regular check-ins with them each week just to help with any technical problems, and I think that also helped to really build rapport, and they were all very engaged, so it went really well.
I think for the the video and the photo documentation, there's a slightly different lens to that as well. Like, I'm just thinking, often in qualitative studies we're asking people to reflect on things after the fact. There's a lot of time that has passed often between when you're sitting down and asking them the questions and when the thing you're asking them to reflect on has actually happened. Whereas this data is really unique in that it's, at times it's probably more in the moment, on the spot. I can reflect on how I'm feeling right now. That's really powerful.
It took out that element of recall bias, I guess, as well. But it also allowed them the time, I think, to sit on process and however long they needed to answer the question. Whereas if we were trying to do that even within an interview space or a focus group space, which are more traditional data collection methods, that can be a really big cognitive load for people,
for sure.
especially trying to load that onto an AAC device as well. So there was a lot of pros to it.
I feel like that's what a PhD often is, isn't it? It's doing something really new and novel, and let's give it a good go.
We weren't sure
right?
how it was going to go, but yes, it
so glad
it did
that
go
you did. When, we'll go into the results of the community section, because obviously that's very keen and excited to hear about that. But just to take it back just a step, because you're talking about participation, and I know there's the two we talk about a lot. There's attendance and involvement. The first part of your PhD, I know you looked into that a little bit more. Based on the fact that your design and qualitative capture was very unique in that way, I guess going back to kind of going, well, how do we actually measure participation in a really true reflective way? It just shows, it's hard anyway.
It's tricky.
Right?
So that's what we found.
Talk to us about that.
So then moving on, I guess, back to the first half of my PhD. So my first paper was a systematic review, which looked at the participation measures used with young people with CP. Right. And we found that the ones that were participation focused, so if we were looking at it with a lens of their FPRC, so attendance and involvement, there wasn't a lot available. And if we were wanting ones that captured both, we found 3.
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Okay.
Out of how many, roughly?
Overall, there was 27, I think, initially included. And then there was a lot less that were participation focused. And then we narrowed those down again to the 3 that were very participation focused. Right. Yes, and so there's that focus then we found on capturing attendance, which is quite limiting.
Very
much. We really need to move towards capturing that involvement as well. And then in that paper, we focused also on the design features of those measures and whether they were accessible, because we're moving towards that self-report. Are they accessible for people with communication support needs to self-report? And there was a real lack of that as well.
Were there any?
No, there was a couple available, but they weren't. They had like a few features that made them a bit more accessible. Like some used some pictures, which is great. Some had the ability, like they had an online version that you could adjust the font and colouring to be a bit more high contrast. Again, great. But we still need to work towards that in that area. And we also found a big reliance across the papers on capturing caregiver proxy report of participation, which was then what led into part B of the thesis, focusing on self-report. So, yes.
So would you say it's an outcome measure? Out of everything that you've seen, what would you recommend that we use at the moment? Well, that's available if you had to.
That's really hard. I think... So I did the systematic review trying to find a measure that would be good to use in the second half. And
spoiler, I think.
I ended up using a different measure that wasn't captured in the systematic review because it hadn't been used with young people yet. The Picture My Participation measure.
Picture My Participation.
It's quite new. But out of the systematic review, the CAPAC obviously is very well used. It is targeted more with younger age groups, so not as age appropriate when we're working with our young adults. And the CIAS, again, was another really good one because it has an AAC version, which is great. Definitely what we want to see. But again, they are initially developed for younger age groups. We are still needing that measure.
The questions are so different. The life stages incredibly different.
They are. They really are. But we're definitely moving in a good way with things like the PMP. But,
And so given all that, you took what you learned from the systematic review, you moved into the second paper,
Delphi
which is a Delphi study. So tell us a little bit about that.
So that was a really great study. I really enjoyed doing a Delphi. So we were focusing in on the most influential factors that are impacting the daily experiences of young people with CP. So we had young people, caregivers and health professionals, and we aimed to get consensus across them on what was making their experiences more positive and more negative. And we split that at that point where we were splitting it for adolescents and young adults as well. But we did end up finding that it was similar across the two in terms of the higher level construct that was the most influential.
That's interesting.
So there was a lot of items that came under acceptability. So the acceptance of other people in the wider community, which was a bit surprising, I guess, that being one of the biggest impacts for them. And availability of supports as well is a huge influence to day-to-day, came out as the two.
Such important findings though, isn't it? So now we've gone through the journey, you've gone to part B, created your own essentially methodology, which I'm really keen to replicate.
Yes, absolutely.
So the home we've covered in quite a fair bit of detail. And I remember you alluding to the fact that community was a whole lot harder. You can have a guess at that, right? But to have it documented when it gets published will be great. But what can you share with us when it comes to community?
It was so much more of a balancing act for them. I think you can make that kind of prediction, right? If it's coming out that it's the environment, that's the biggest impact for them. When you're moving out to so many different environments that are not targeted for you, then you're facing so many challenges day to day. But it was exhausting, obviously, for them every day moving. So we had some kids still at high school, some moving into uni, some trying to find work, their leisure experiences, doing community sports, going shopping, traveling, wheelchair airports, wheelchairs on the planes. All of those things were captured in their study.
Yeah.
It is there was so much. The quotes were so rich, and definitely contrasts quite a bit to the home paper, which had more of a positive.
Yeah, it was quite positive.
Yeah,
wasn't it?
positively.
Yeah.
This one definitely still has positive elements to it, but it's way more, way more balanced. Some of the quotes were, are a bit heartbreaking, really. The things that they have to put up with day to day of other people's attitudes. Which feels like something that we can work on.
That's right.
Yeah, and I imagine the cumulative effect of that, like just within one day, all the different opportunities there are to experience, disappointment
things not
and
going well.
Things not working out how they should for you as a human being navigating your way through the world. Yeah. And then you take that each day across a week, across a month, across a year. It's exhausting. Yeah.
And then thinking about also being in that exhausting phase of life of being an adolescent
trying to
or a
work out who
young
you
adult,
are and how you fit in, and
is challenging for everyone, right? And then you're navigating that with a disability, and there were so many experiences shared, like things like they would go out and wherever they went, everyone would assume whoever they are with is their carer or their support worker. So they'd be out with friends at a bar or something. And in that context as well, for our participants that had communication support needs, they would also be assumed that they were intoxicated, or, they'd get cut off or not allowed into the bar or...
That's still happening?
It's still happening, which is just so tiring for them. So just those things would just, cut you down to the point where you're like, what's the point of going?
Yeah, that's why home needs to be so positive.
And that's why home became almost an equalizer. A play. And then now with us being able to work from home and study from home and do all those things from home did help in that respect. But we still want to be able to, have positive experiences out in our community. But yes, that paper is full of really interesting, sad and happy experiences.
So, Jacinta, what are your key, I suppose, takeaways from that paper and from, this journey of a PhD that you've had? And what do you do next with that?
I suppose key takeaways in terms of like our clinical implications, it's focusing on the self-report as much as we can, starting from even that measure level. It can be much easier just to ask the parents what they want to do, what they're working towards, but if we can really shift focus when our young people are becoming adults, we need to try and do that by using accessible measures. Focusing on the environment as much as we can. I know it's, as a clinician, we're already run flat and sometimes our funding doesn't allow for us to also work around our person, but advocating for them in their different environments is just so important to help with that acceptance across wider communities.
Those are good take-homes.
Absolutely. And I think you've shown through this work that we can and we should include those perspectives. Because it's possible. You've done
That's
it.
right.
So it can be done.
Go forward.
Now it just needs to be done.
And their insights were just so important. They were so excited to be included. When we would approach them to ask to be involved, they were surprised. Especially the AAC users. They hadn't been asked for a study where they had to share their experiences ever before, and they were just a lot were very excited, which was just
speaks to the importance of it, doesn't it?
Absolutely.
Gosh, well, Jacinta, you did a good job summarising all of that in a very short podcast episode as well.
No, thank you. You guys are amazing to talk to again.
We love it. We love chatting with you. We'll keep talking to you because I think it's where we'll keep evolving.
For sure.
Definitely.
Okay.
So, we'll wrap it up. But thank you so much. And to all of our listeners, hope that was just as exciting for you to hear about that research and work. And, just keep an eye out on Jacinta's PhD paper on Saturday.
Yes.
Thank you.
Congratulations again. Well done.
Congratulations. All right, see you guys later. Bye.
Bye.